Do you know someone amazing? Someone who has a unique job or hobby? Maybe someone involved with an interesting organization, be it a creative community or a charitable mission. There are people like this hidden in our community, living their daily lives all the while achieving incredible goals, creating works of art, inspiring others to be their best, or just generously donating their time. This show is about putting a spotlight on these members of our community. I'm Ben Harris, a 2017 graduate of Shrewsbury High School and alumnus of the SHS Speech and Debate team, here to introduce a new show that will be hosted by different members of the current team each episode, showcasing their talents as they work to deliver these enriching community stories to you as we celebrate these quiet but undoubtedly impressive individuals. Simply put, we want you to stay with us for a moment, because these are the people you have to meet.
Hello and welcome to another episode of You Have to Meet. My name is Steve Asthana and I'm the current treasurer of the Shrewsbury High School Speech and Debate team, and I'm sitting here currently with Naureen Meraj, who is the Chief Learning Officer and a co-founder of Teach the World. So Naureen, can we start off by just asking you to explain a little bit about Teach the World and what exactly it is?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me here, and I'd be happy to tell you more about Teach the World. So Teach the World Foundation is a nonprofit organization where our mission is to establish and deploy effective and scalable models of literacy and learning by leveraging the power of digital technology. So basically, the original vision behind that is to take gamification, philanthropy, digital technology, and online learning and combine all of that into a mechanism for learning for those who don't have access to education or teachers for that matter.
Okay, so when you co-founded Teach the World, what previous life experiences or job experiences led to you doing that?
Well, my background is in sociology, education, and human development. So actually my career started out as a guidance counselor at West Boylston High School. And there they really enabled me to expose students, and implement a program actually where I can expose students to multicultural diversity. Okay. And it was very successful. And essentially that actually led me to be recruited into the corporate world to do something similar for global companies and employee engagement because of the diverse population that global companies now have.
Okay, so when you were talking a little bit about Teach the World, you talked a little about gamification. Now, could you explain to us what gamification really is and what the benefits of it is?
Sure, absolutely. So gamification is basically behavior reinforcement. You use game design principles to tap into one's psyche to drive behavior, and that increases levels of engagement, ideally through intrinsic, but sometimes extrinsic rewards. To put it another way, it enhances the learning experience through engaging user interaction and rewarding participation. So it psychologically encourages a participant to desire progression and to desire the completion of the task at hand. So in a business environment, for example, it can increase productivity and creativity, which essentially then increases profitability, or it could very well be a factor in it. Similarly, in a learning environment, it can encourage learners to actually learn better, and it motivates them to excel, it increases the retention of knowledge, and it actually helps them leverage what they've learned with this instilled confidence.
Okay, so many people may have not heard of gamification. So is Teach the World trying to also propose that gamification should be used more often and trying to spread the message that it has or what it accomplishes too?
Yes, in fact, that's one of the foundations of how we are trying to establish our work is through gamified learning. So gamification is an essential part of that. And basically, it's helping us with illiteracy problems by helping people learn through gamified learning, gamified education, so that when they don't have access to schools or teachers, they can still get onto this digital platform and still get that learning that they need to be able to function in mainstream society.
Okay, now let's go back to when you actually co-founded Teach the World. Could you tell us when you co-founded Teach the World?
Sure. So when I was working at NTT Data, I was heading the gamification and innovation over there. And they actually gave me an opportunity to start a CSR initiative, which is corporate social responsibility.
Okay.
And at that time, I really wanted to incorporate gamification with learning and development. And although that was already happening, it was still very new. And coming from an educational background, I knew it could do wonders for a learning community, students and corporate learners alike. So they allowed me to build out that platform. And that CSR project essentially turned into Teach the World. So at the time, trying to incorporate incorporate gamified learning into the school curriculum here was a little bit difficult. We didn't have the data that we needed because it was so new to be able to pilot something in a public school setting. So in 2016 is when we first officially kicked off Teach the World Foundation. And given that the three of us who are co-founders all had ties to Pakistan, we decided that we'll start there as a means to see if this works, this vision that we have of using all of these techniques and bringing them together. But also because we had ties there, we knew we'd have the access, to be able to go there and try to work with the impoverished communities that live there. Being a developing country, it has a very, very high illiteracy rate, unfortunately. So we knew we'd be able to find children who would fit that model that we were looking for.
And you were able to help them in the end, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we basically did a pilot in the slum areas of Karachi, which is the largest city in Pakistan. And we'd got about 23 kids, and we deployed a 3-month pilot program in which we gave them digital tablets. So we had a facilitator there. This is not a teacher. This is a facilitator who we train how to manage the tablets, basically, hand them out, collect them back, those type of things. Just sort of oversee the discipline and the management of the program. And then we invited the students. We had to actually entice them at first with a meal because, again, these kids are poverty-stricken. And going to school, especially when they haven't been exposed to going to school, it's not really on their priority list. So we got about 23 students, enticed them with a meal. And these kids were coming from communities that were so illiterate that they couldn't even tell you the color of their shirt. And over a 3-month period of time, we exposed them to the digital tablets. And we had a numeracy and literacy game on there, so English and math. And the results were amazing. So this was our interventional group. And compared to the control group, which were kids who were in a government school setting, getting like a more traditional education, the students or the children who were in our makeshift classroom, using digital technology and this particular program, scored 2.5 times higher in English and 3 times higher in math.
That seems pretty remarkable, and the results are clear. So could you talk to us about what the vision was when you started Teach the World and how over time that changed?
So original vision, I may have mentioned earlier, was to try and eradicate illiteracy in the best way that we possibly can. There's, I think, about over 780 million people who are illiterate in the world, and that's just the official numbers. And through research of our own, we suspect that there could be over 1 billion globally, 1 billion people who are functionally illiterate. And what that means is that they can't do basic things to move around and function in society, like read a newspaper or any kind of document for that matter, daily things for survival. So we wanted to make sure that we can give access to these folks, starting with young kids who can then help their families. A lot of these kids are an integral part of their family ecosystem, when it comes to just making a few pennies on the dollar to help get a meal for the day, or things like that, or pay the electricity bill, if they happen to live in an environment that might even have electricity. There's so many different things. And unfortunately, so many of these impoverished communities don't have access to schools, and even if you try to create a school environment, there's not certified teachers that they have access to who can actually come and teach on a daily basis. So we're not trying to basically substitute teachers here. We're not, because I personally, coming from an educational background, feel that it's of utmost important, the role that teachers have. But in an environment where that's not a possibility, we want to make sure that children can still gain the education that they need to function properly and successfully. And for an environment where there are teachers, it's a great supplement.
Mm-hmm. So you talk a lot about literacy rates, but what are your overall concerns about literacy rates worldwide? What are the trends we're seeing, and how are we fixing that right now? And can we improve what we're doing to fix that?
Sure. So literacy has been going up, which is great.
Okay.
But as I mentioned, there's still a huge population of folks who are functionally illiterate. You may learn to write your name or even sign your name, but do you really know how to conduct yourself in society to be able to make a living, for example? So there are concerns because in a community where people are not given access to functional literacy and education, then there's higher crime rates, there's higher health risks, there's so many more implications from not being literate or having understanding of numeracy, basic numeracy, to be able to function in society. And until we take care of those issues, and it starts with the literacy aspect, so until we take care of those issues, crime, and other types of infestation, adverse infestations will continue to rise.
Okay, so just curious, you talked a little bit about how you had to entice the kids to come to your school, right? And now you're talking about how those kids are essential to their family's economy and their financial situations. So I'm curious, did you also have to entice some of the family members who might have been against their children spending some time at school because of the fact that they're so important to their financial status?
Of course, a lot of these families depend on their children to bring in whatever little bit of money they can. So that's why we sort of started with the younger kids, and that's who we are geared towards right now. And they're usually about ages 4 to 7, 4 to 8, give or take. So that makes it helpful, but we try to implement the program in a way that is friendly in the sense that those families who are requiring the help of their kids to bring in money, and they have jobs that they go and do. Like, for example, I went to Bangladesh earlier this year, and in one of the communities that where we deployed this program, there are kids who work during the day, like helping the mechanics or what have you, small jobs. So we want to make sure that we have evening classes for these kids. Also, the other very integral part is that we make sure that we are partnered up with an established NGO, which is like a non-governmental organization, an established one that's already deployed on the ground there.
Okay.
And first of all, we can't just go in to a country and start doing whatever we want. So the first and foremost. But secondly, the reason why it's important for us to partner up with these folks is because they understand the culture and what some of these communities have to face. And so through them, then we can have a good understanding of what we need to do to deploy this program successfully, so that not only are families and children enticed to participate in the program, but also that we're not becoming a problem for them, because you can imagine how much they rely on every little bit that comes in.
Exactly. Okay, so you talked a lot about your experiences in Pakistan, but you also recently went to Bangladesh, as you just said. So could you elaborate on what you did there and the differences you saw between the two countries and what you tried to establish that was different there?
Sure. Well, I just want to say in Pakistan, right now, the communities that we've been working with are not refugee communities.
Okay.
They might be disadvantaged in many ways, but they aren't necessarily refugees. They are of that country. And that was the big difference, that when going to Bangladesh, the two communities that I went to go and see and who we're working with are refugees. So, for example, there's a refugee camp in Dhaka called the Geneva camp. And that is the largest of the many camps. I think there's maybe about a couple dozen, maybe a little bit less, of these camps that are basically residing stranded Pakistanis, or at least that's how they're referred to. And this, if you don't mind, I can tell you a little bit of the background to that.
Go ahead.
So basically, when I say stranded Pakistanis, these are folks who have pretty much been displaced and stranded from their home country. So in 1947, Pakistan had gotten their independence from India. And what is now Bangladesh used to be East Pakistan. So that was all one country. So when Pakistan became independent, there was a large population of Muslims who lived in the northern part of India in the province of Bihar, known as or identified as Biharis. And many of them moved to Bangladesh as being an established Muslim country. And again, remember, Bangladesh at the time was East Pakistan.
Right.
In 1971, Bangladesh then ended up getting its independence from Pakistan and became its own country.
Okay.
Unfortunately, these Pakistanis, these Biharis, were stranded there, and it was meant for them to go back to Pakistan. And to be completely honest, I don't necessarily know or understand the politics behind all of that. So I'll refrain from getting too deep in that.
Right.
But the end result was that they were stranded there, and since then, for 3+ generations now, they've been forced to live in these refugee camps that are less than desirable, to put it mildly. You know, they're a very proud and humble people who hope to get out one day and go back to Pakistan. A couple of the last generations probably haven't even seen the country, but yet they're very loyal.
Right.
Nevertheless, they live in these camps, and they have to survive there, and there's a lot of discrimination. They don't, you know, I think there's almost 500,000 of them in Bangladesh now. Wow. 150,000 of them are kids under 10 without access to education. So that's just, you know, one quick overview of one of the camps. The other camp that I visited was the Rohingya refugee camp, and these are the population of folks who have run from Burma or Myanmar and are taking refuge in Bangladesh as well.
Okay, well, that's great that you're helping these people. It's incredible to hear like the scope of the problem in Bangladesh, and especially knowing the people from Myanmar who are now coming to Bangladesh. It's sad to see that the problems are increasing there. Yes. So could you talk a little about the facilitators that work with these children? Sure,
absolutely. So now are you speaking specifically in the Bangladesh communities? Or?
In both communities.
Okay. All right. Well, in Dhaka, we have a couple of facilitators who oversee the program and hire, you know, folks who are referred to as teachers. But basically, we train them in, as I mentioned before, in handling, you know, the disciplinary management of the devices and, you know, just attendance and things like that, and just kind of making sure that things are run smoothly. But some of them have very interesting stories. There's this one young man named Sunny, who's 25 years old, and he actually started taking care of his family at the age of 7 because his mother became a widow, his father passed away, and he had 4 younger sisters. So when he was 7, he figured out a way to sneak out and get himself enrolled in a school.
Okay.
And you have to understand that, you know, if you are considered Bihari or Urdu speaking, which is the language of Pakistan, which this community speaks in Dhaka, as opposed to Bengali, then they are found out as being Biharis and not Bengali. And so sometimes there's discrimination of allowing them to go to school. But this kid managed to start speaking Bengali and got himself enrolled into school by taking on a job, you know, saving up a little bit of money after giving whatever he could to his mom, and basically took care of his family until his mom was able to, you know, get up and start working again, and then his 4 younger sisters. And today he's 25 years old, he's working on his master's program. An amazing, amazing guy to be able to do so much at such a young age. Another kid, and this is actually really relevant to what we do at Teach the World in teaching, you know, literacy and numeracy. So this young man is 20 years old, his name is Noor. And he also grew up in the camps as well. He's now a facilitator. And when I met him, this was earlier this year in April, May time. And when I met him, he spoke impeccable English.
Wow.
And I was like, I wonder if you were one of the lucky ones who was able to get enrolled in an international school maybe. So I asked him about that, and he told me that he said, no, actually, you know, I had started learning English on my own, you know, a little bit here and there from what we learned in school. But as I became older and I started going outside of our camp community and started speaking in English, I would be teased. So then I realized that, okay, I'm doing something wrong. Clearly I'm not pronouncing things correctly or using it in the correct context. So about a year and a half ago, when we established our program through Teach the World at the Dhaka camp, at the Geneva camp, he actually picked up one of our devices and started using one of the learning games called Footsteps to Brilliance, which is the English game that we've implemented in there. And through that, he was able to learn how to speak English impeccably. So in 1 year's time, he speaks as if he's a natural, as if he's like an English-speaking native. So some interesting stories about how this has been helpful to a lot of folks.
That is amazing. And when you probably heard about that at first, you were probably very excited to see the impact of your own.
Oh, absolutely,
of
absolutely.
devices.
So it's clearly not just for young kids, because illiteracy hits all ages, and you can start at any age, anywhere. But there's a lot of stories like this, and that's what we try to do. Is like even in the refugee camp, the Rohingya refugee camp, or in the different communities like the slum communities or what have you of Pakistan, wherever we deploy, we try to bring in facilitators that are part of that community.
Okay.
So that we can have that connection.
Must be really helpful.
Yeah. So that we can have that connection and really understand where they're coming from.
Exactly.
And their stories are always remarkable.
And I feel like for the people living there or stuck there in that scenario, it must be really bad if someone from another land came there and just tried to teach them their own language. So I think that's incredible that you find people in those communities to help them.
Yeah, it definitely makes communication easier, because sometimes there is a bit of a communication gap, for the outsiders coming in and not being able to speak the language or understand their language. And so it does definitely help.
Yeah. So as you just demonstrated, your program can help all age groups for literacy for all levels, because realistically just writing your name, as you said, won't get you anywhere besides just a few legal documents. So I'm seeing that this could be helpful all across the world. So where else is Teach the World trying to establish programs?
So as I mentioned, we have a couple of places in Bangladesh already. And I would love to touch upon the Rohingya camp because there's a new program that we started there as well in just a moment. But we're in about 4 or 5 different communities in Pakistan. We are now deployed in Malawi, Africa as well. And there's a lot of discussion going on with other countries within Africa as well as in Mexico. So, our scope, our hope is to really scope this out further and be able to really implement these in more formalized curriculum, but also just be able to give that access to whomever needs it through partnering up with the different organizations. So we're still fairly small, but all in all, even though we have maybe a handful of communities in just a few countries, I think our range of people that we are now helping is between 1,000 and 2,000 kids, or at least will be within a couple of months. So given that we are very small and we're still trying to get our name out there, we've been able to be quite effective.
All right. So you just mentioned that you wanted to touch upon the Rohingya population. Did you want to add anything further on that?
I would love to do that because earlier you had asked about what our vision and our mission is about with Teach the World, and a lot of it is geared around eradicating illiteracy. But something new that we've started, and we deployed this as a pilot in the Rohingya community in Bangladesh, is the social-emotional learning. So a lot of these kids and adults alike, they're coming from a situation that is overly traumatic. The things that they've had to endure, to see, to go through, it's unspeakable. So there's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of smart little kids out there, but they become limited,
because
or
they don't have
hindered.
the tools.
They don't, exactly. They don't have the tools to cope with the emotional stress, the trauma. And there's not a lot of tools out there established for kids from these type of communities who are coming from this kind of background. There's a lot of games out there. And lacking the type of therapists that we would need, to be able to help these kids. We thought if we could also expose them to digital learning content that uses social emotional learning to help them, then how great would that be? So that's a new program that I was able to establish with the Rohingya community, and we've just piloted that with about 60 kids. And we're hoping for really good results. The feedback that we've gotten so far has been phenomenal, just from a qualitative perspective, where kids are more in tune with checking in with their emotions, getting validation from their peers,
That's good.
having conversation and dialogue about how to cope with different types of trauma that gets triggered because of different things that might happen, every now and then. So I want to just highlight that along with literacy, this is a very critical part of our program now, because although this Rohingya situation might be a little bit more extreme, there are situations even, in slum communities that have been deprived of things where social emotional learning may become useful and effective.
Right. So right now you're saying that Teach the World is a small community and a small organization, but could you one day see this becoming a global initiative?
So it is already a global initiative, but yes, I do hope for it to become expansive and broader and touching upon a lot more communities, hopefully working with many more partners that are already established on the ground, whether it's through the UN or other organizations. We work with a number of them in Pakistan and Bangladesh already. So, we hope to partner up with more and more of them so that we can have a more profound impact, in a positive way with the disadvantaged communities around the world.
Okay. And then lastly, I just want to touch upon one main point. Do you think gamification could be used worldwide too, just as you were explaining earlier?
Oh gosh, yes. In fact, I
Yes.
think it already is on its way, if not already established in many countries. A lot of countries are using it for banking, for education already, for so many different means. And a lot of times people think that gamification is all about turning something into a game.
Right.
And it's not about that. It's just about finding the necessary elements that really drive a person's behavior in a positive direction. To actually, like I mentioned before, progress and complete tasks. And the healthy competition, whether it's within yourself or with peers or colleagues or what have you, is always a good way to push people to do better. So a lot of companies, whether it's corporate or otherwise, have realized that. More and more schools are now using it, I'm happy to say. In fact, one of my colleagues had, before he joined us, his name is Robert Torres, he actually established or helped establish a school.
Gamification?
Well, a school called Quest to Learn, and it uses, it's in New York, and it actually uses game techniques to run the whole entire educational curriculum.
Pretty cool.
Where kids have missions and quests, and they have to use all different subject matters in a game-like format to learn, and their results have been phenomenal as well.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences from Teach the World and visiting the entire world where you got to learn about refugee communities and communities that are underserved and how you've helped them through education, through gamification, and through Teach the World by co-founding it. Thank you for watching today's episode. Do you know someone in our community that you think should be on our show? If so, reach out. Once again, thank you for watching You Have to Meet, and I'm Steve Asthana, a member of the Shrewsbury High School Speech and Debate team, sitting here with Naureen Meraj, the Chief Learning Officer and the co-founder of Teach the World. Thank you for coming to our interview today, and thank you for watching.